This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com. Okay, Bruchim Abam, welcome everyone. So this is our second shiur here at our new venue, Kehilas Avas Yisrael. We want to welcome all of our Torah Anytime viewers, and we want to invite all of our viewers to join us in our new venue here in Cedarhurst at 568 Peninsula Boulevard, 11516. Everyone's invited to our very comfortable shul, and Mirza Hashem, look forward to seeing everyone over here. Okay, Parshas Vayeitzey. So this evening we want to investigate a very interesting subject, a very interesting topic. Tonight we're going to speak about ahava, and speak about love. And the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos that there are various categories of ahava. The Mishnah says that it all depends if it's conditional or unconditional. Says the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. In Parakeh, Mishnah Yotes. Kol ahava shitluya b'davar. When love is dependent on something, when it's conditional, so then whatever it's conditional on, whatever it's taloy on, when that thing ceases, that's the end of the ahava. However, any ahava which is unconditional, ahava she'ena tluya b'davar, then will last forever. And the Mishnah asks, what's an example of ahava she'tluya b'davar? What's an example of a conditional love? The love of Amnon and Tamar, which was not really ahava, it was more like lust, and as soon as the reason for it ended, the ahava ended, and actually they hated each other, sinas hamaves. However, the Mishnah says, what is an example of the most altruistic, the purest, unconditional love? The love of David and Yehonatan. That is held up as the paragon, as the quintessential example of ahava. And when we come to the love of David and Yehonatan, we encounter something very unusual. Yehonatan tells David, right now I'm next in line to be king. My father is Shaul HaMelech, my father is the king. I'll be the next king of Klal Yisrael. But the truth is, I don't mind. Atatim leChal Yisrael, you'll be the next king. And I'll be your shamish, I'll be second in command. Okay, so here, Yehonatan was next in line to be the king, and he says, it's not a problem. You, David, you could be the king, I'll serve you. I'll be second in command, I'll be Mishnah LaMelech. I don't know about you, but in the world of rabbis, it doesn't work that way. If somebody's the Rosh Hashiva, and someone's the Sagan Menahel, I guarantee you it never happened in the history of the world, where the Rosh Hashiva says, you know what? You could be the Rosh Hashiva, I'll be your assistant. I can guarantee you, it never happened. In fact, it never happened anywhere on planet Earth where somebody who was in charge said to the guy who was going to be his second in command, you know what? You can have the covet, you can have the responsibility, and I'll be mashamish you. Something like that doesn't happen. It's unusual. Human beings don't work that way. When a person has a certain position, they want to remain in that position. When a person is being groomed to be the melech, they expect to be the melech. They would never give such a thing up. And here Yehonatan says to David, no problem. Yisrael, you'll rule, and I'll be second in command. What's the explanation of that? Also, if you look in Shmuel Beis, in Parak Aleph, when David found out about the demise of Yehonatan, David HaMelech eulogized. He gave a hesped for Yehonatan. He said the following. He says, Tsar li olecha achi Yehonatan. It pains me. I'm aggrieved over you, my brother Yehonatan. You are so sweet to me. You know how much I love you. Niflasa ahavas chali. Your love is wondrous to me. Me ahavas noshim. Greater than the love of women. I love you so much, David. David says to Yehonatan, I have an outpouring of ahava for you. I love you more than women. You would not expect David HaMelech to invoke that. You would not expect him to mention that. Why is he even using that as an analogy? As much as I love Nashim, I love you even more. It's unusual for such a thing to come out of David HaMelech's mouth. Why is he invoking Ahavas Nashim in describing his love for Yehonatan? Now, this is a very big question. This is a question of the Rama Mipano. Rama Mipano was one of the Italian Mikubalim. Rama Mipano was a contemporary of the Beis Yosef. In fact, the Beis Yosef lived in Sfas, in Eretz Yisrael, and in Eretz Yisrael there were no printing presses. So how's the Beis Yosef going to publish Beis Yosef on the Torah? All the printing presses in the time were in Venice. The Rama Mipano lived in Venice. Beis Yosef sent the folios, the manuscripts of Beis Yosef, he sent it to Rama Mipano to publish for him. So Rama Mipano was a one of the early Italian Mikubalim, he wants to know, why would David express himself in this way? He says, Neflasa havas chali me'ahavas nashim. Why would he express himself in this way? Okay, so Rabbi, we come to Parshas Vayeitzey. And we know, we meet in this week's Parsha for the first time, Rachel Imenu. And we know the Navi tells us in Navi Yirmiyah, we learned it on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, about the cry of Rachel Imenu, the Acharis Hayamim, the famous words of the Navi Yirmiyah, Kol Berama Nishma, right? Where the Rebbe Shalom says, I hear, Kayamar Hashem, Kol Berama Nishma, I hear a voice on high. Nihi B'chi Samrurim, wailing, bitter crying. Rachel Mevaka Al Baneha. Rachel crying for her children, Me'ano Lehinachem. She can't be consoled. Al Baneha, for her children, Ki Einenu, they're not here. And the Rebbe Shalom says to Rachel, Kayamar Hashem, Mini koilech mi bechi, stop crying, veinayich midima, don't allow your eyes to cease from tears, ki yeshachel fulasech, there's reward for your actions, v'shavu me'eretz ha'oyev, v'shavu banim l'gvulam. That's the famous promise of the Rebbe Shalom to Rachel Imenu, that in the merit of your cry, Klal Yisrael will once again return to Eretz Yisrael. This is the eternal cry of Rachel Imenu. And there's a famous medrash, and it's kedai to know where it is and to see some of the words inside. The medrash in the Psicha Te'echa Rabbah, in Ois Chaf Dalet. The medrash tells us that this is not just a cry of Rachel Imenu, because after all of our avos are mispala for us, all of our imos are mispalelas for us. But nevertheless, of all the tefillos, of all our illustrious ancestors, the one which is most effective and is payal the most is the cry of Rachel Imenu. In fact, the Medrash tells us that at the time of the Churban Beis HaMikdash, Avram Avinu came to Ribbono Shel Olam. He said, Ribbono Shel Olam, how could you allow the Beis HaMikdash to be destroyed? I waited 100 years to have a child, 100 years to have a son, and you tell me, go shecht him, go shecht my son. And I, who was the greatest Baal Chesed in history, I took my son, I took Yitzchak Avinu, and he was 37 years old. I was 137 years old. And I had to be an achzar to my son, and I had to tie up my own son, and I had to be kavash rachamai. I had to conquer my mercy to my son. Ribbono Shel Olam, if I could overcome my human rachmanas to my son, can't you overcome your feelings of anger to Klal Yisrael? And Ribbono Shel Olam, look at me, look what I did. And Ribbono Shel Olam says to Avram Avinu, nah, not good enough. Akedah is a nice thing. We remember on Rosh Hashanah, but at this time, it ain't going to cut it. Akedah. So Yitzchak comes to Ribbono. So Yitzchak says, okay, Avram Avinu, at least he would have been alive. But I was an adult, and I allowed myself to be shechted. I stuck out my neck so my father could slit my neck. Ribbono Shel Olam, look what I was willing to do for you. Can't that protect Klal Yisrael? And Hashem said, no, not really. It's not going to do it. And then Yaakov Avinu says, Ribbono Shel Olam, 20 years, I ran to Lavan's house after 14 years spending in the Yeshiva Shem Be'ever. And after that I encountered Esav, and I was moiser nefesh to try to save my family from Esav. All my zechusim, all my mitzvahs, all my ma'asim tovim, can't that protect Klal Yisrael? And Hashem said, not really, no. Nice try. And finally the Medrash says, I want you to see inside, it's the Psicha Te'echa Rabbah, over here in the second column on page 1, says the Medrash on the fourth line on the second column. At that moment, Rachel Imenu jumps before God. Ribbono Shel Olam, Galoi lefanecha, it's revealed before you. Yaakov that Yaakov loved me a great love. V'avad b'shvili le'aba sheva shanim, and he worked for my father for 7 years. And when the 7 years were up, I realized that my father was going to switch me with my sister. Behuksha alai hadavar ad ma'oi. I didn't like it. It was very painful. We think, yeah, Rachel just gave it up. The Medrash says, no, it hurt her deeply. It hurt her acutely. And I made up with my husband a certain simon. I made up with like a secret code that this way Lavan would not be able to switch us. And we made a deal. Yaakov Avinu and I made a deal that if Lavan tries to play any tricks, we're going to catch him. He's not going to be able to do it. But b'shas ma'isa, I was worried about the shame of my sister. I was worried about my sister's embarrassment. So what happened? I gave over the simanim to my sister Leah. Says Rachel Imenu, Uma ani shani basar vadam afar va'efer. if I, flesh and blood, dust, like kinesi latzar shli, if I wasn't jealous of my competitor, I didn't allow her to be embarrassed. Viata melech chai v'kayam, you living and enduring God, Rachaman, are you going to be jealous of other gods who are nothing? If I could overcome the jealousy to my sister, can you, God, overcome the jealousy that you have to the other Elohim Acherim? Says the Medrash, at that moment, Nisgalgulu Rachamav Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu, and Hashem says to Rachel Imenu Kayamar Hashem Chayil Berama Nishma Tishavu Vanim Ligvula. And the question we would like to deal with is, what exactly did Rachel do greater than Avram Avinu? I mean, Avram Avinu waited 100 years to have a kid. 100 years. Okay? He did everything possible. He did the Boinei Olam, a time, went to every organization. It didn't work. They said, Avram Avinu, it's not going to work. Sorry, Imenu, she's not infertile. She's an islander. She doesn't have a rechem. There's no chance. Sorry. You have to go elsewhere. It's not possible. He waits 100 years to have a kid. He has the kid. And when he's 37 years old, Hashem says, shecht him. And he's ready to shecht him. And that can protect Klal. So big deal. Rachel wanted to marry one guy. A lot of people on the market. Why was this a greater zechus than anything Abraham did, anything Yitzchak did, anything Yaakov did, anything Moshe Rabbeinu did? What's the pshat? What's the pshat? Right? What's the pshat? So, and we know that Rachel Imenu was strategically placed at her kever because not only was she aware that she would be needed one day, but Yaakov Avinu, who buried her there, was also aware that she would be needed to be buried there one day. In fact, Parshas Vayeitzey, when Yaakov Avinu asks Yosef to bury him, take him out of Mitzrayim and bring him to Eretz Yisrael, so Yaakov says to Yosef, look, I know you're very bothered by this request, because I'm asking you to do something that I myself did not do for your mother. I know when your mother died, when Rachel Imenu died, Rashi says that Avram Avinu did not even bring her into Eretz Yisrael. You know, there's an amazing Rashi. Rashi says that Rachel Imenu was buried in Chutz La'aretz. Say, how could that be? She's buried in Be'efrasa. She's buried in Efrat. Efrat is Eretz Yisrael. Look at Rashi says, number 7. That Yaakov Avinu says, "Ve'ekbara Sham, I buried her there. V'loy hoylachtia afilu lebeis lechem lachnisa la'aretz." I didn't even bring her to Beis Lechem, to Hebron, to bring her into Eretz Yisrael. I just buried her in Efrat. So there's a big chasam sofer on this Rashi. What are you talking about? He buried her in Eretz Yisrael. What does it mean? V'loy hoylachtia afilu lebeis lechem lachnisa la'aretz. But in any event, it's a topic in and of itself. What does Rashi mean? But Rashi is saying that Yaakov Avinu was saying, look, Yosef, I know you're bothered. I know you're upset that I'm asking you to do something that I myself did not even do to your mother. I had a reason for that, says Yaakov Avinu. You should know that I did it al pi Ruach HaKodesh. How's that? That I foresaw Ruach HaKodesh, that one day Nevuz Radin would be exiling Klal Yisrael, and Klal Yisrael would be leaving, and in the eyes of Yibban Shalom, that's it. They're leaving Eretz Yisrael, never to return again. And Avraham Avinu is going to daven, and Yitzchak's going to daven, and Yaakov's going to daven, and Moshe's going to daven, and Yibban Shalom's going to say, no, sorry, too bad, it's all over. And Rachel Imenu, as Klal Yisrael is passing by her kever, which was strategically located on the roadside, Rachel Imenu is going to emerge on her grave, Koil Berama Nishma, and she's going to daven for Klal Yisrael, and that's going to be the only thing that saves them. So Yosef, don't be bothered why I didn't bring her into Eretz Yisrael. I needed to bury her there. Because Klal Yisrael is dependent on her tefillah. Nobody else could daven for Klal Yisrael like Rachel Imenu. In fact, even more interesting, Yaakov Avinu meets Rachel for the first time. Vayishak Yaakov l'Rachel. And the first time Yaakov meets Rachel, Vayisa es koiloi vayef. Yaakov Avinu cries. Yeah? What's so sad? I mean, this is the Kala over here. Well, what's he crying? He knew he was going to marry. Why is he crying? So Rashi says on the spot, L'fishet Safa Baruch HaKodesh She'eino Nechnesas Ima L'Kura. Yaakov foresaw that even though he's going to marry this lady, he would not be Zoicha to be buried next to her. And that's why he was crying. So Shlach HaKodesh asks, what kind of reason is that to cry? Well, what does it affect him that he's not going to be buried with Rachel? It bothers him. It's so sad. You know what? First get married, and then have a life, and then you worry about it when you die, who you're going to be buried next. No, before he even marries the lady, he's already crying that he's not going to be buried next to her. Says the Shlach Kadosh. No. Why Yaakov saw, when Yaakov saw Rachel, he realized he wasn't going to be buried next to her. Why wasn't he going to be buried next to her? Because he knew Klal Yisrael would be in such hot water that the only person who could save them was Rachel Imenu. So he saw the Golus. When he saw Rachel, he saw why we needed Rachel to daven. He saw the Golus, and that's why Yaakov Avinu was crying. He saw the hot water Klal Yisrael was destined to be in. And therefore, again, like we see, Rachel Imenu was strategically located in a place where we needed her and we were able to utilize her tefillah. In fact, the Medrash says that the conversation between Yaakov Avinu and the shepherds of Lavan, when Yaakov Avinu asks the shepherds, Yehonatan, and they said, Mecharon anachnu, the Medrash reads into this that, what was Yaakov Avinu saying, Mecharon anachnu? Yaakov Avinu says, I feel charoinaf ba'olam. I feel golus. I feel Klal Yisrael one day is going to be in a terrible matzav. And the shepherds say, don't worry. V'hinei Rachel b'toy bo'em atzoin, meaning you'll be safe from it. Why? Because you have Rachel imenu, v'Rachel mevaka albaneh. So Rachel is, the last hope. When all else fails, when there's a concept, tamuz chus avos, right? There's such a thing. We daven every day, zoicher chastei avos, remember us chus avos. But on the other hand, the Gemara says there's a concept, tamuz chus avos. It's shayach, that we could be in a situation where we maxed out on our chusim. And at the end of the day, the only one who could help us is Rachel Imenu. What is it about her? Why is she the one who could pull through for us when nothing else helps? In fact, the Zohar HaKadosh says the same thing in number 13. Zohar HaKadosh Parsha Shemos says the Zohar on the words Bivchi Yavayu Uvesachanunim Oivileim. Says the Zohar Mahu Bivchi Yavayu Bezachus Bechi De'em Hayeled, in the merit of the mother, Shehi Rachel Yavayu V'Yiskanshin Min Galusa. Galus will end ultimately because of the cry of Rachel Imenu. And Reb Chaim Vital brings down from the Arizal that every night at Chatzois Halayla, when tzaddikim have a custom to get down on the floor and to say Tikkun Chatzois, why at that moment? Says Arizal, every midnight Rachel comes out over her grave and she cries over Churban Beis HaMikdash. So this is not just a one-time event. It wasn't just when Radin was exiling us. It's every single night, Rachel Mevaka Al Baneha. Our Mavinu, he's not helping us at midnight. It's not Yitzchak, it's not anybody else. It's only Rachel Imenu. What did Rachel Imenu do? Okay, so we know, well look, she gave up her husband her whole life. She was anticipating, awaiting the zchus to marry Yaakov Avinu. And at the last moment, she gave up her whole future. How did she give it up? So we're all familiar. The pasuk says, take a look at number 15. Vayiva boiker, it was the morning. V'hinei Leah, behold, it's Leah, right? We know whenever it says the word hinei in the Chumash, hinei means surprise, right? In yeshiva they translate behold, but nobody has any clue what the word behold means. Right? It's not like when you talk to somebody, how you doing? Behold, it's not a word that anybody uses. Normal people don't. The word v'hinei means it's a surprise, something unexpected. In the morning, surprise, that's taka, big surprise. Wrong girl. V'hinei Leah, right? A little bit of a mix-up. So Rashi thought, what do you mean v'hinei Leah in the morning? What about at night? It was also Leah at night. It was also a surprise at night. So Rashi said, no, at night Yaakov Avinu had no clue that it was Leah. Yaakov Avinu thought it was Rachel. Why? How's that? But what about what happened to the Simanim? So Rashi brings down, look at the Lashon of Rashi. Lefi Shemosar Yaakov Simanim l'Rachel. Yaakov gave signs to Rachel. Uchshara sa Rachel shemachnisim Leah. But when Rachel saw that they were bringing in Leah, Amra, she said, Achshav tikale machoisi. My sister's going to be embarrassed. Umasrula oisan Simanim. She gave her the Simanim. The Gemara Megillah says the same thing as Rashi. The Gemara Megillah on Daf Yud Gimel and Beis. The Gemara calls it something very interesting. Beschar tznios shehoisa ba Rachel, in the merit of Rachel's modesty that she gave over the Simanim, zachza v'yatza mimena Shaul. She merited to have Shaul. Who came from Shaul? Who's Shaul's son? Yana's son. And the merit of the tznius of Shaul came Esther. And the Gemara asks, what kind of tznius did Rachel have? So the pasuk says that when Rachel met Yaakov, so Rachel told Yaakov, by the way, my father's Lavan, meaning he's the biggest scam artist in history. Yaakov said, no problem. I can match him. I could deal with him. I could, go measure to measure with Rachel, with Lavan. No problem. So Rachel says, but you're a tzaddik. Only Rishon are allowed a trick. So Yaakov's not true. Im navar titavar v'mikesh titav. With a trickster, with a scam artist, you could be a scammer. Lavan's a liar. I will go measure to measure with him. So Rachel said, but what are you going to do? So Yaakov said, no problem. We'll make simanim. We'll make a code. And whatever kind of shtick he plays, we'll catch him. So the lashon of the Gemara is Masar la simanim. Yaakov gave to Rachel simanim. By the way, if you look back in the Medrash, in the Psikta Rabasi, the lashon of the Medrash was Umasarti lo siman. Rachel gave Yaakov Avinu siman. It's a little bit of a machlokes, right? The Medrash, the lashon of the Medrash is Rachel gave the siman to Yaakov Avinu. The lashon of the Gemara is Yaakov gave the siman to Rachel. So we'll have to deal with that. So the Gemara says the tznios of Rachel that she gave over the siman to Leah. So by the way, there's just a tangential. What do you mean the tznios of Rachel? How's that tznios? It's modesty to give up. I understand if the Gemara would say that Rachel gave over the simanim because she felt bad. She didn't want her sister to be embarrassed. What kind of? It's not tznios to give over simanim. How is that modesty? So I once heard that many years ago. Our Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Henach Libowitz, Zechatzak Levracha, he said there are really two things going on over here. Because what did Rachel do? Rachel gave over the simanim to Leah. Why did Rachel have to give over the simanim to Leah? Rachel could have gone to Lavan and say, Lavan, you could pull every trick in the world. It's not going to help. We have a secret code. And that would have stopped it just as well. Instead of giving it over to Leah, why didn't Rachel just tell Lavan, nothing you could pull, we have a secret code? The answer is, it would be a lack of tznius for Lavan to know that there's like personal things going on between Rachel and Yaakov Avinu. This is Dvarim Beinish L'Isha. For her to divulge it to the outside world, the personal conversation, personal things, that would be a lack of tznius. Fine. So she didn't do that. But she could have, she didn't have to give it over to Leah. The fact she gave it over to Leah, that was also protecting her shame as well. Okay, so now we come to something very interesting. The Marsha asks, how did Yaakov fall for it? Okay, very nice. Leah knew the simanim, and we'll have to see what exactly were the simanim. But Yaakov must have asked her, what's going on? How do you enjoy the wedding? What's happening? You had a good time? And she must have said something, right? So he didn't recognize her voice? I mean, the Gemara says the biggest tviyas ayin is a voice. No two people in the world have the same voice. In fact, the Gemara even says that a blind person cannot have relations until he hears the voice. Otherwise, he doesn't know who it is. The voice is the most distinguishable characteristic of a person. So Yaakov didn't hear the lady speak? That's the kasha of the Marsha. So it's pointed out in the Sefer Oitzer Place HaTorah that if you look back at the Medrash in the Eicha Rabasi, the Medrash says a davar oyam v'noira, an amazing thing. Now, other Rishonim disagree with this, but if you look in the Medrash, it says Rachel imenu v'loy oid elo shenechnasti tachas hamita shahaya shoiche v'machoisi. That Rachel imenu not only gave her the simanim, she went into the room. She was tachas hamita v'haya medaber ima. And when Yaakov spoke to Leah, Leah didn't say a word. Rachel spoke for Leah. Va'ani, says Rebbe Sham, could you imagine such a thing? Could anyone tolerate? It's bad enough that Rachel gave up Yaakov Avinu. Not only did she give him up, she gave over to Leah the siman. Not only did she give simanim, she facilitated the kedusha. Otherwise, she would have been caught. She was there, ba'oisai makom. She was medaber and Yaakov Avinu, and Leah didn't say a word. So ayam v'naira, how a human being could possibly ever reach such a madrega where they gave up everything in their life. If anybody could ever do such a thing, they would say, fine, you want him? Take him. And they would move to a different planet or something. No. She's right there. Ba'oisai makom. She's speaking on behalf of herself. Now, most Rishonim disagree with this. How they could disagree with the Medrash, the Chizkuni, for example, Chizkuni says in number 20, Chizkuni is bothered by this kasha. How could Yaakov Avinu not recognize Leah's voice? And the Chizkuni says, well, that's because there is no conversation taking place. Midas Hatznius is that at that situation, at that time, Shalei Ladaber Bein Ish L'Isha, there's certain halachas guiding conversation. You could take a look in Shulchan Aruch, in Siman Reish Mem and on. There's certain halachas, and they were abiding by these halachas. Yaakov didn't hear the call. Yaakov didn't hear. So he did not recognize the voice. By the way, there's a sefer written by Rabbi Yehuda HaChassid. Yehuda HaChassid wrote a sefer Gematrios, where he also writes that Leah, nobody spoke, there was no conversation, there was no talking, and Yaakov Avinu did not hear anything. Didn't recognize. Rabbi Say, what were these simanim? What were the simanim? What was the code? 613, what was the code? If that's the code, you could get into anywhere, every single, right? What was the code? Says the Das Kenim Ibalei Ataisus, this is what Taisus says, the code was like this. We know there are 3 halachas that women need to know. What are they? Nida, Chala, Hadlakas Haner. This was the magical formula. Yaakov, he does the Kedusha, Harei HaMekadosh Shli, and then, no, what do you have to say? And she said, Nida, Chala, bang. She's good to go. That's what Taisus says. The Chida writes, Al Pi Kabbalah, an amazing thing. She says, an Eishes Chayil, the way the Eishes Chayil is Ma'orer B'Shas Zivug, she comes into contact with the right big toe, and the right big thumb, and the right earlobe. Says the Chida, that was the siman that Yaakov Avinu gave to Rachel. The right big toe, the right big thumb, and the right big earlobe, and this chases out of the man all shadim. Somehow men have a lot of shadim in them. It's not true, So the way you get it out is you have the right big toe, right big earlobe. I can't get into any more. These are the facts. If you want to know more, then we'll talk about it privately. These were the simanim that Yaakov Avinu gave over to Rachel. Ben Yoyada says like this. In Masechta Yevamos, it says that Tamar was the first woman. The Gemara is talking about this. We know, the Gemara says that Ein Ishtoi Nisaberes Mevir Rishayna, that a woman will not become pregnant from the first relations. Right? Ein Isha Nisaberes Mevir Rishayna. So the question is, what do you mean? Yaakov Avinu said about Ruvain. Ruvain is Kaichi V'Reishis Aini. Ruvain is the first seed of Yaakov Avinu. How is there such a thing possible? So there's an idea, the Gemara says, that Tamar was the first lady. She was Ma'acha Be'etzba. She removed her Besulim manually, and that rendered her a Kli, and that's how Tamar was able to be Nesaber Mibir Rishayna. So Ben Yoyada asks, Tamar was the first person? Obviously Leah did it first, because Leah was Nesaber with Beruvain, Bebir Rishayna. Right? How? Because we know Koichi V'Reishis Aini. So Ben Yoyada says like this. The siman that Yaakov Avinu made with Rachel is Yaakov Avinu said that I'm Ish Kadosh, I'm Ish Tam Yoshev Halam, and I am Kadosh B'Tahar. I don't even want Bia Rishayna to go Le'ibud, so therefore you need to be Ma'acha Be'etzva. You need to render yourself a Kli even before the Kedusha. That's the siman. Rachel then went ahead and told Leah the siman. So Leah was the first person who did, but she didn't do it on her own. So that's why the Gemara says the first person to do it was Tamar. That's why when Tamar says to Yehuda, you want to know how come I'm pregnant? She uses the following lashon: Leish asher Eila, says Ben Yoyada. Eila could be arranged Leah. Eila. You know where I got this from? Your mother. You're blaming it on me? Go to your own mother. She's the one who invented this. That's what the Ben Yoyada. So far we have 3 perushim in the simanim. Okay? One pshat is Taisus, Nida Chala Hadlakas Haner. One pshat is what the Chida brings down, the toe, the thumb, the earlobe, and the other pshat is Ma'acha Be'etzba. So let's go back to the stira. The stira is the Gemara says that Yaakov Avinu gave simanim to Rachel. The Medrash says Rachel gave simanim to Yaakov Avinu. Is it a machlokes? It's not a machlokes. There are 3 different simanim. They're different simanim. Some of the simanim Yaakov gave to Rachel. Some of the simanim Rachel gave to Yaakov. It's not a stira. It's that's why it's called simanim. It wasn't one siman. They had a whole host of things. She had to do different tricks to prove that she in fact is Rachel, and Rachel gave them all up to Leah. Another amazing thing, you talk about the Gevura of Rachel Imenu. You have a chas and a kala. It was no different back then. You have to give the kala gifts. You got to give her the diamond ring. You got to give her the bracelet, the machzorim with the name on it, all the things. They have the candlesticks, right? V'chahena. There are a lot of gifts they have to give, especially they're engaged for 7 years. And every Shabbos he sent her, and every week, UPS came with delivery to Lavan's house, and it said on the gift, to Rachel. Says the Medrash, Lavan ripped off the address, ripped off the name, and he wrote Leah on it. And Rachel said, what's going on? Where are my gifts? And she didn't say a word. She didn't want to embarrass her sister. And every Friday, Leah would come, sit at the table with her jewelry, with her bracelets, and Rachel kept her mouth closed, knowing full well that Yaakov sent it to her, and Lavan switched it for Leah. But now we come across something which is the most astounding of all. Because if you look in the Pasuk, look at number 27. We know that in the house of the Avos there's a big competition going on. When people are close to each other, naturally there's competition. So it depends what people are into. Sometimes people are into materialism, so there becomes competition. Who could have more? Who could have more this, more that? Well, in the house of the Avos, there was a different kind of competition. Who could have more children? Because the Avos viewed every child was the biggest bracha in the world. So naturally, there was a lot of competition. Who's going to be Mamid, the biggest mishpacha? And they all knew there was only going to be 12 children. So the first one went to Leah. The second one went to Leah. The third one went to Leah. Rachel's going out of her mind. What if she has one more? She's going to have more than her share. And everybody's trying different ways to increase their fertility. And one day, the Pasuk says, Ruvain went out. Look at number 27. Ruvain, even the children were competing. In other words, even the children wanted their mother to come out on top. They wanted their mother to come out with the gold medal. Most children from Yaakov. So Ruvain was searching the forest for fertility-inducing herbs. And he came across Vayimtza Dudaim Asad. He came across the Dudaim. Dudaim was a certain type of herb, the Mefarshim say, which enhances fertility. Vayave Yosam Leah. He said, Leah, look what I got. She said to her mother, look what I got. You won't believe it. You're going to be on top. You're going to win the race. So Rachel sees, Vataymer Rachel Leah, do me a favor. I don't have any kids. Tinili, mi dudai benech. You mind giving me some of the seeds? At least could have one child. Vataymer La. Leah says to her, Hamead kachteches ishi yu mechutz efes. It's bad enough you have the goal to steal and live with my husband. You live with I married him first. It's bad enough you're living with Yaakov Avinu. And now now you want to take my herbs, my nutritional supplements. It's bad enough you took my husband. Now you want to take my vitamins. So Rachel said, Anshuldik Mir, you're right. It wasn't so nice of me to take Yaakov Avinu. So do me a favor. You give me your nutritional supplements, and you can have Yaakov tonight. What kind of chutzpah is this of Leah? It's bad enough you took my husband. Doesn't she know she's lucky she ever got to live in Yaakov's house for 1 second? She didn't belong here at all. Rachel's the one who gave her everything she has. She owed her life to Rachel. She owed every minute with Yaakov to Rachel. And she has a chutzpah. It's bad enough you stole my husband. Like Leah thinks, who does Leah think she is? She thinks she's Ikaras Habayis. That she turns to Rachel and she says, bad enough you ever lived with my husband, and now you want to take my nutritional supplements. Now you want to take my dudaim. How could she ever bring herself to say those words? I mean, isn't that ein lecha chutzpah? I mean, in the whole Torah, I don't think I ever came across a bigger chutzpah. That's how Leah talks to Rachel. Rachel gave Leah everything, and Leah's making believe like she forgot. Now she has 3 kids. She thinks she's the Akaras Habayis, and Rachel is stealing Yaakov Avinu. If I were Rachel, I would say to Leah, the gall of you, you shouldn't even be in this house. Get out of here. You don't belong. You were the one. Go marry Esav. I think Esav's calling. I think Esav. Maybe I could set up a date with Esav. You and Esav. you're lucky I didn't have, if he would have married to Esav, you'd be locked up in a room somewhere, and Esav would have cut the telephone wire so you couldn't call the relief hotline. You would have needed Yad Lachim to rescue you from him. This is how Rachel talks this is how Leah talks to Rachel. So you have to say that Rachel made it that she wasn't doing a big deal by giving Yaakov over to Leah. Rachel made it that no sweat off her back. You want to marry him, you can marry him. In other words, after Rachel gave the simanim to Leah, how would Leah be able to live with herself her whole life, knowing she owes her whole life to Rachel? Every minute she had with Yaakov Avinu is because of what Rachel gave to her. It would be like an ani. Let's say you have a guy who has no money at all, and you give him $1 million, but you insist on walking right next to him his whole life. I mean, he'll feel like a piece of dirt, because every second you're rubbing it in that you gave him everything he has. So I mean, how did Leah live with herself next to Rachel in the same house? Rachel must have really gone out of her way to make Leah feel so comfortable that Leah starts to begin to feel, I deserve Yaakov Avinu. But still, I mean, this is Leah Imenu. How could she ever bring herself to the state where she feels such a sense of entitlement that she owns Yaakov, and if Rachel wants to take her nutritional supplement, she says, a chutzpah, it's bad enough you live with Yaakov, now you want to take my dudaim. Says Rav Shalom Shvadron, one of the most astounding things you'll ever hear. You have to say that the simanim that Rachel gave to Leah, Rachel never told Leah that she was giving her the simanim. Leah never knew that Rachel gave her the simanim. One day, Rachel said to Leah, I hear Yaakov Avinu loves you so much. Every Friday he's sending you gifts. It's beautiful. I wish you all the bracha in the world. I just wanted to tell you a few things. It's important. There are 3 halachas you really need to know, because there are a lot of chasanim out there that they're going to want to make sure you know this the wedding night. So when you get married, you need to know nida, you need to know chala, you need to know hadlakas haner. There's something that you might need to know. Maybe your chassan's going to want you to know something. And then she told her over, I just want to call you over. You see this chidah, it's a geshmak chidah. The chidah says that, the right earlobe, the right toe, and the right thumb. Oh, Lisa, thank you for telling me. It's good to know. That's how I'll get the shadim out of my husband. And also Rachel said, look, a lot of chasanim, they're very holy. You need to be machal be'etzvah. Never in a moment did Rachel ever tell Leah she was doing her a favor. Rachel never said, Leah, I'm now doing you the biggest favor in the world. Leah went her whole life thinking she deserved the Yaakov Avinu. She was entitled to Yaakov Avinu. She never knew Rachel gave her the simanim. She thought that Rachel was just helping her along. She was a good kala teacher. She told her nida chala hadlokas haner. She told her the chida. She told her the ben yayada. And Leah married Yaakov Avinu thinking Yaakov loved her. Yaakov gave her gifts. And she never knew Rachel did her a favor. So when Rachel comes, could you maybe give me some of the dudam? Leah said, what? Dudam? It's bad enough that he had to marry you also, and you have to. It's not enough that I let you move into the house. It's bad enough that I did you a chesed, that you could also marry Yaakov Avinu. Rachel Imenu was so altruistic in her love for Leah, to the point she never let on to Leah that she gave over the simanim. She never let on that she was giving up all the matanos. She never let on. She gave up her whole life for Leah. The Akedah was one moment. Hashem tells Avram Avinu, go shech Yitzchak. He was willing to do it, and ultimately Hashem said no, and the Akedah was over. And he got to go home and live the rest of his life in peace and quiet. Every second of Rachel's life, she tippy-toed around her sister so that her sister should not feel that she was second-class, just the opposite. She made it that she was second-class citizen, and Leah was doing her a favor being married to Yaakov Avinu. That is the greatest. How do you have such av? To give up everything, where you're going to be the melech, you're going to be Akaras Habayis, and you give it up to somebody else where you're second fiddle. That's Ava Sheina Tluya B'Davar. This was the greatest love in history. The love that Rachel had to Leah. There was another Ava Sheina Tluya B'Davar. The love of David and Yehonatan. David was the descendant of Leah. Rachel was the descendant of Yehonatan was the descendant of Rachel. Yehonatan was from Shevet Binyamin. How is it possible for a human being like Yehonatan, who was being groomed to be the next Melech Yisrael, to give everything up to David HaMelech and say, David, you'll be the king and I'll be your assistant? That could only have come through the Maisa of Rachel giving over the Simanim to Leah. Because Rachel was the great ancestress of Yehonatan, and Leah was the ancestress of David HaMelech. Says David to Yehonatan, when you look at the love that we have to each other, it's ava she'ena tluya b'davar. It's unconditional love. It's inexplicable. It's undescribable. Where does such a thing come from? How is it humanly possible? Who injected this into you? That you say, Ato timlech al Yisrael v'anochi elech al Mishnah. You be the king and I'll be second fiddle. Where does that come from? Says the Rama Mipano. Says David HaMelech, Niflasa avos chali. You know how wondrous your love is to me. You know where it comes from. Me'avas noshim. From the love of two women. You know which two women? Rachel and Leah. When Rachel gave over the simanim to Leah, what Rachel was doing was she was injecting into Klal Yisrael the ability, first of all, to create Malchus Beis David. Malchus Beis David could only come from complete Ava She'ena Tluya B'Davar. When Rachel gave up her entire life, all her hopes, all her aspirations, to the point she gave it up so altruistically, where she made the other person feel that they deserved it, and Rachel made herself feel she was second class, that created Malchus Beis David. David HaMelech says, Yehonatan, you should know that my love for you is not happenstance. It's not just, we click, we get along. This was created, me'avas noshim, from the love that Rachel had to Leah. When Rachel gave over those simanim, she created Malchus Beis David. So it comes out very beautiful. Let's point down the Sefer Shvilei Pinchas, that until Leah had Yehuda, Rachel did not even try to have a child. Leah had Reuben, doesn't say Rachel wanted a child. Leah had Shimon, Leah had Levi. Once Yehuda was born, Rachel said, okay, that's why I gave you the simanim to begin with. I wanted to create Malchus Beis David. Okay, now it's my turn. Then Batakane Rachel B'Leah. Rachel said, give me a chance, give me some dudam, give me something, throw me a bone. But not until Yehuda was born, Rachel kept her mouth closed. He belongs to you, he's all yours, I don't even belong here. Ata timloich v'ani eyelecha lemishnah, like Yehonatan says to David. Says the Rama Mipano. This is a final Maramakim. We're just going to bring out one more point. The Rama Mipano writes in Maimar Chikar Hadin Chelek Dalet. Says Rama Mipano, Ki amnam ki haya Yehonatan sameach v'chafetz liyos lemishnah. Yehonatan was happy to be second fiddle to David. Ki amnam nefesh Yehonatan nikshra b'nefesh David kakata nitla b'daval. This is what David said, Nifleisa havos chali. Ki ein aseichel soivel midarach hateva. It doesn't make any sense. It's not logical that one human being could be so giving to another human being. You be the ruler and I be nothing. Where does that come from? Me'avas noshim. From the peladika mesiras nefesh, that Rachel is willing to give up everything, give over the simanim to Leah. The love of Rachel to Leah was the first example of Ava She'ena Tluya B'Davar. Right? The Mishnah says, what's Ava She'ena Tluya B'Davar? David and Yehonatan. Where does it come from? Rachel and Leah. We know that there's a concept, Tammuz Chosavos, that you can't always tap into the Chosavos. Sometimes we've maxed out. So at the end of days, when we're maxed out on the Chosavos, and we say, Rebbeinu Shalom, help us. And Rebbeinu Shalom says, I can't. Akedah, you already used it up. You already built a show for 5,000 Rosh Hashanahs. What do you want from me? So that doesn't work anymore. And there's nothing left. The only thing we could bank on is we could say to Rebbeinu Shalom, but you don't love us because of, you don't love us because of this chus, because of that chus. You don't love us because we deserve it. Your love for us is Ava She'ena Tluya B'Davar. It's unconditional. What awakens the Ava She'ena Tluya B'Davar that the Rebbeinu Shalom has for Klal Yisrael? After all, that's the only thing we could bank on when all else fails. Well, we know the Rebbeinu Shalom's love for Klal Yisrael is a mirror image of the way that we act toward each other. So when there's Ava She'ena Tluya B'Davar Beinish L'Chaveroi, that engenders, that awakens Rebbeinu Shalom's unconditional love for Klal Yisrael. So at the end of days, Rachel Imenu says to Rebbeinu Shalom, everything else has been depleted. There's nothing else to tap into. But you know that you love Klal Yisrael, Ava She'ena Tluya B'Davar. Don't you remember when I did that for my sister? Don't you remember when I was moiser the simanim to my sister? Don't you remember I gave up everything for her? She kept the matanos. I was tachas hamita. I was speaking in her stead. She never knew that I gave her the siman. That was ava she'ena tuli b'davar. And that ava she'ena tuli b'davar created Malchus Beis David. And the Rebbeinu Shalom says, yes, Rachel Imeinu. Everything else, Avraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, all else has failed. But when it's Kol Barama Nishma, when you remind me of the altruistic love that you had to your sister, Yava She'ena Tuli B'davar, says the Rebbeinu Shalom, that's something I can never ignore. Teshavu Banim Legvulam, says David HaMelech, my love for you, where does it come from? Me'avas Noshim, the love that Rachel Imeinu had for her sister Leah. Shkayach.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.